Good evening, everybody. I want to welcome you back to No Limit November. This is our third installment. I'm excited and I hope you are. My name is Eddie Young and I serve Fort Mill High School as our career development facilitator. And tonight's session is all about creating your best resume. We know that your resume is a walking, talking personification of who you are. So we want to make sure that you have an opportunity to put your best foot forward. And I have some friends who have joined me. I call them my sisters from another mister. I'm excited to have them with us tonight. So I'm going to let them go around and introduce themselves first.
Hi, I am Cameron Jacobs. I am the University Relations Program Lead with JELDWIN Windows and Doors. I partner alongside Holly and team with our early career programs, specifically focused on identifying talent from our universities for a number of our early career programs. So happy to be here tonight.
Hi, everyone. My name is Holly Milanese, and I also work at JELDWIN alongside of Cameron. I work in human resources and talent development, working on our corporate onboarding as well as our early career programs. So nice to be with you tonight. Thank you for having us.
And hi, everyone. My name is Miranda Clark. I am also at JELDWIN as part of our early career rotational program and the human resources function. So I recently graduated from the University of South Carolina with a degree in human resources management and marketing, and definitely have a passion for this space. So happy to be here tonight.
Awesome. We want to thank you all for being here and volunteering just a few moments of time in your life to pour back into our students. We know that you all have a great presentation lined up and we want to hop right into it. As you're watching, please, ma'am, please, sir, students, submit questions. They have a lot of great information, but if something, you want to dig a little bit deeper in, make sure that you leave the questions in the comments section and we'll get to it as soon as we can. But now I'm going to cue up their presentation and let them take over.
Excellent. Thank you, Eddie. We really appreciate it. I know we just had an opportunity to introduce ourselves, so we just wanted to tell you just a little bit more about ourselves in hopes that may help guide our conversation today. So as I mentioned, I work in human resources and talent development. Prior to working at JELDWIN, I was working in higher education for about 7 years, most recently in the career development office, working as a career advisor. And then in addition to that, I currently am still an adjunct instructor, and I teach a couple of classes around career connections, career development. So this is definitely a space that I get really excited about. So our goal tonight is to hopefully share some incredibly helpful tips with you. And then, of course, we'll provide our contact information if anybody wants to reach out and ask any additional questions. So again, excited to be here with you tonight.
Yes, and again, I am Cameron Jacobs, University Relations Program Lead with JELDWIN Windows and Doors. I have been in talent acquisition for going on 9 years. I ended up coming over to JELDWIN on the talent acquisition team in February, and had the luxury of moving over to work with Holly on our early career programs and doing recruiting for that. I have taken a great interest in programs such as this to be able to teach young individuals like yourself about resume building and a number of other things. So very excited to share a little bit more with you about the importance of resumes today.
All right, so we thought it would be helpful to do a little bit of self-reflection. And Eddie, if we do have some folks in the chat that want to submit things through, maybe you can relay some of that information. Otherwise, this can definitely just be more introspective. But we wanted to gain a little bit more of understanding about, what does a resume mean? So Cameron, if you want to take us through a little bit.
Yeah, so we have resume here as the focal point of this image because a resume actually does have great connections to some of these or all of these words. So just as a few, or to pinpoint a few, job. So your resume is the main point of contact or interest in terms of being able to get you in front of the right employer for whatever job of interest that you have. Or advancement. You actually have to update your resume on your new experiences and skills and responsibilities so that your resume reflects the skills that are necessary for any areas of opportunity or advancements that you're interested in. Or life. Your resume is kind of a great portion of your means of living. So being able to update your resume so that it reflects what's necessary, so that way you can continue on the path that you desire in terms of how you make a living. So your resume really does have, a great weight in terms of what you do with your career, and it's connected to a number of different things, as you can see here in this image.
So I just really encourage you all to, think again introspectively and ask yourself, what is it that you want to demonstrate on your resume, right? So thinking about it as your personal brand and your professional brand, how do you want to be branded? How do you want to be represented? And then start thinking about what matters most and make sure that those items or those things are included on your resume. So it takes us next to what is a resume? So we covered this a little bit already, but to kind of break it down for you a little bit further. So the first one here is that really a resume is an opportunity to provide a summary of your experiences, your skills, your abilities, and your accomplishments. So this is really a way for you to demonstrate those particular competencies on paper. In addition to that, it's a tool to sell yourself to prospective employers. So in some cases, this may be your first opportunity to introduce yourself to a potential employer. So one way I like to think about this is think about yourself as an advertisement, and your resume really is your vehicle in advertising yourself and your competencies and your ability to perform. So we'll talk a little bit about how to do this effectively as we go through this presentation today. Additionally, it may be an introduction to the employer. So in some cases, as I said just a minute ago, this could be your very first introduction to this particular employer. So as you may have always been taught, right, about making a good impression when you first see someone in person, the same thing goes with a resume. You want to make sure that you put your best foot forward in making an excellent introduction. And then this one's really important. This is oftentimes, again, your first assessment of communication. So many times people write down that they're excellent at communication, and communication is a viable and very important skill to any employer and to any college. However, if you say you're an excellent communicator and you submit a resume with a lot of different spelling errors or grammatical errors, it definitely doesn't send the right impression. So you want to make sure that the proof is in the pudding. And in order to do that, I really recommend having somebody review your resume for you to make sure that whatever it is that you're trying to come across or demonstrate is actually done so, and that you have really eliminated any sort of grammatical or spelling errors. So to really wrap it all up, we already talked about, what is a resume? It is your opportunity to sell yourself. So now we're going to transition to actually talk about how do you shape a resume? What's included? I'll kick it over to Cameron.
Awesome. So here we'll take Stevie's student's resume, an example to show us what to include in our resume. So your resume has a number of different pieces, and we'll walk through some of the sections. So at the top, we'll start with obviously Stevie's student's name, as well as his basic information. So in this section, you'll have your name and contact information, as well as your email address. And then also, if you have a LinkedIn page, you want to put maybe that web address there, or any other page that will relate to your creative abilities if you are in the artistic or art field, or any other link to your work that can the employer could actually view from your page. Then you want to go to your education. So in this case, obviously, Stevie has gone to Fort Mill High School. We also list any sort of college experience in this section as well. So in most cases, some students are taking AP courses or college courses early. So you want to list those that college there, as well as the fact that you're in progress there, or any classes or coursework that you've been able to take. In this section, you can also list clubs and honors, as well as relevant coursework. So in this case, I will say Stevie has done any sort of maybe trade classes. Say, for instance, he's been in the culinary arts classes and he wants to become a chef. Here, he'll put that coursework so that it relates to his overall skill and experience there. And the employer that he's looking to catch interest can see that he's been able to do exactly that. Then we'll also put your major achievements, and working experience. So major achievements being anything that you've done. In this case, Stevie has been on the Student Government Association as well as the Yearbook Club. And so here you want to list things that help to show the employer or whatever entity that you're trying to appeal to a lot of those characteristics and traits that you have that relate to the job or can make you an asset into their job. So leadership experience or tenacity or teamwork and collaboration. So a lot of those character traits that you can't necessarily communicate in terms of your work experience, but you can sell yourself in through your resume by those. Also, in this case, I always say that we should definitely quantify some of the things that you've been able to do. So say, for instance, with Stevie's case in the Student Government Association position. So he supervised 8 to 10 volunteers at any fundraising events, or he oversaw them, he led them. So that's a point of being able to show some of those characteristics and traits. Also, in his case, we'll have his experience, which may be listed underneath the major achievements, and then any additional skills. So in the additional skills section, I usually say to mention any sort of systems or software that you've been able to use, any additional languages that you speak, and any other things that can be an asset to selling you in terms of your experience to the employer of choice. But in a nutshell, as Holly mentioned, your resume is just to kind of sell yourself or to consolidate all of your experience. So that way the employer has more of a snapshot of what you've been able to accomplish or what skills you can bring to the position of interest.
All right. So now Cameron had just had an opportunity to run through the different bullet points that you would have in the experience section. But now you may be wondering, okay, so that's great. I understand how to set up a resume. But what's the meat of it, right? What actually goes into these bullet points? So I'm going to actually walk you through what it looks like an equation. And you may be wondering, why in the world are they here to talk to us about resumes and walking us through an equation? And I promise it makes a lot of sense. So just bear with me. The one thing to note is that it is typical to have about 3 to 5 bullet points per. So that's really what you're for within each of these bullet points. Another recommendation that we have is to always work backwards. So what I mean about this is that a lot of times when we're reading resumes, it ends up just being a running list of every job duty, every responsibility, which is great, except that it'll be more meaningful to the employer if you consider working backwards. And what I mean about that is if you were to, let's say, look at a particular college program and you have to create a resume and you're looking at what certain competencies they're looking for, or maybe you're using this to get a job and you're looking at that job description. Either way, the employer or the university will give you what I say, the answers to the test. They will share with you what they're looking for. So now it's your job to help articulate how you demonstrate those particular competencies in your resume. So I encourage you to first look at what are they looking for? What are those key competencies? And oftentimes they're things around leadership, teamwork, communication, critical thinking, attention to detail. So think about those things, highlight them, write them down, and then work backwards from there. Ask yourself, when have I demonstrated this particular competency in my role working for the yearbook? Or when have I demonstrated this particular competency in a class project? So asking yourself that question will really help you really figure out what you need to be putting on your resume for that particular university or that particular job. So now that you understand the concept of working backwards, let me actually walk you through how to create a bullet point. So the first thing you do is you come up with your power verb. So many of you are, of course, are familiar with what a verb is. So really a power verb is a verb that really evokes strong feelings of completion, or things like the word manage, oversee, implement, communicate. Those are all really great power verbs. To help you all as well, we'll be sure to provide this PowerPoint that can be maybe shared with you all at a later time. And at the very last slide, we actually have a link for you that will take you to additional power verbs. Because I know for me, sometimes I end up leaning on the same ones over and over again, and it's a really good idea to have a good variety. So that's a power verb. one thing to note here is that you want to make sure that it's in the correct tense. I know that seems sort of silly and maybe a little bit obvious, but I will share with you candidly that about 90% of the resumes I review, the verb tenses are incorrect. So if you are currently doing something, so maybe you're working with the yearbook, that verb should be written in present tense. So you communicate or collaborate. Maybe you are no longer in the yearbook and it's written in the past tense. You collaborated. So that's just a tidbit of information. Hopefully that is helpful for you. So once you start with your power verb, so in this case, we're going to use the example from the resume that Cameron just walked you through. So we have created and executed. So there's your power verb. Then you're going to answer the question, that's great. So there's your power verb, but what did you actually do? Well, in this case, he ended up creating and executing an effective fundraising idea. Excellent. So I will also share with you that the majority of the resumes that I read really stop here. And that's okay. But if you were to add this next part of the equation, the why, the so what, or how, it's really going to change your bullet point. And you'll be able to see that here in just a moment. So what I mean by why, so what, or how? Well, you're not going to include all of those things. That's a lot for one bullet point. But if we were to say the why, that would mean, why would someone need to create and execute an effective fundraising idea? Why is that important? Or if you wanted to focus on the how, it would be, well, how did you create and execute an effective fundraising idea? Maybe you demonstrated a certain competency that allowed you to do that. So in this example, we're really focusing on the why. So created and executed an effective fundraising ideas to raise funds for a senior trip. So hopefully by now you'll already see how that takes it from a pretty good to a wow bullet point. But now here's the extra trick. And Cameron already gave you this tip a moment ago. Now let's add some metrics. Metrics, that sounds like a scary word. What I mean by that is just how many, how often, or how much. So how many people did you work with on a team? How often did you meet? And maybe in this case, as fundraising, how much did you fundraise? So in this case, if I were to add the numbers and I were to change just slightly, now it says created and executed effective fundraising ideas to raise $100 for senior trip. So again, hopefully if you really were to follow that equation, you'll see how by adding the why, so what, and the how, and the metrics really does make a huge difference in creating that bullet point. It makes you a lot more memorable to a potential employer or to a potential university. All right. So now you can see the full sentence here. And that's what we say wins the award, right? So that'll get the attention of the person that you are trying to get their attention. Hopefully that makes sense. But now I'm going to go ahead and kick it over to Cameron to now walk you through some additional do's of a resume.
Yeah, so now we'll talk about some do's of the resume. So just a few. To kick us off, we'll talk about quantifying your success. So as I mentioned previously, and as Holly also mentioned, adding that metric is all the difference in helping the employer to understand a little bit more about what you've been able to accomplish. Or even in the case of being able to talk about, say, for instance, the bullet point was creating a new process flow to increase product completion by 25%. That adds value into being able to show what a difference you were able to make with your new idea or what you were able to bring to the table. So the next bullet point is demonstrating behavioral skills. So in most cases with early career opportunities or entry-level opportunities, employers know that you may not have all that's necessary for the job, but if you have some of the main criteria, as I mentioned, about your leadership abilities, your ability to multitask, or your ability to collaborate and strong teamwork skills, if you have some of those things, those are the things that you can't necessarily teach. Those are intangible. So if you can do those things, they can teach you the job. So being able to really enhance some of those things in your resume is definitely a major selling point as well. So in your resume, also, you want to eliminate clutter. So it could be fluff or run-on statements or redundant statements or irrelevant information to the job that you're applying to. So you want to make sure that you eliminate all of that so that whenever the employer or recruiter or whatnot are reading your resume, they actually have a clear and concise message of what you're looking to accomplish or to get out of applying to their position. The next statement is use a variety of power verbs. And I won't repeat what Holly just said. She did a great job of explaining the power verbs and how to use them in your resume, but make sure that you use a number of them, as well as different ones. So don't necessarily stick to using the same exact one, but maybe research a number of them and use them all, or many of them. Also focus on what you can bring to the company. So in this case, I always recommend that you really, really take a strong look at the job description, identify what the employers are looking for, and compare that to what you've been able to do in terms of your skill and experience. If they are looking for a leader, as I mentioned, enhance your leadership experience in your resume or really pinpoint those things. If they're looking for certain skill sets, maybe pinpoint those in terms of what you've been able to do or your experience and highlight those in your resume. Next, proofread. So read your resume thoroughly and make sure that there are no mistakes in the resume, as well as no misprints, but also have someone else to proofread it. Sometimes when you're reviewing your own work, you can miss certain things, but having someone else to look at it gives it a fresh set of eyes. And they can really help to make sure that you don't have any, issues or errors in your resume. Next, tailor. So make sure that, as I mentioned, as you're reviewing the job description for your position, make sure you're tailoring your resume to that role or that industry. Resumes can take on different formats or different forms based on what industry you're looking to join. So make sure that you're tailoring your resume to the audience that you're trying to reach, as well as to that industry or to that particular position. Also work backwards. So think about the end goal, what you want to accomplish by applying to this position or creating this resume, and work backwards from there. I think that there's great value in understanding the end result first, because it really does help you to reinforce in terms of being able to write your resume and to reach that goal. Also, as I mentioned, knowing your audience, I mentioned that in terms of tailoring as well, but just make sure that you're identifying your particular audience. If your industry, like I said, is one that's related to the arts, your resume may look a little bit different. You may pull out different points or use different power verbs. So make sure that you know your audience and you're tailoring your resume to that. Then also use keywords. So another thing that you can do in the job description is those skills and the things that they're requiring are there for you to see. So if you have those skills and experience, or if you're able to kind of pinpoint some of those things in your resume, use those keywords so that those words can help you to catch the recruiter's eye. Or even some systems now use aggregators. So they use those keywords to pull out whether your resume fits the job description or fits the criteria. So using those keywords will really enhance your experience, but also put you in some of the top resumes that the recruiter is actually reading for that particular position.
Excellent. And even to kind of go off of that, for anyone who's creating a resume just to apply to a university, I will share with you, after having worked in admissions, we did look at resumes, we did look at applicants holistically. So when we were reviewing candidates or applicants for admission, we would look at their resume to see if they could demonstrate certain competencies that made them very well-rounded. So I think that's really a great point that Cameron mentioned about using keywords, and the same goes for when you're applying to school as well. All right, so we've given you a number of tips and tricks. We walked you through how to actually build out a resume and then build out your bullet points. So you have that. So now we're going to go ahead and have you review your own resume personally, or just even think about your own resume as it stands currently to really check to see, did you pass the resume inspection? So the first one here is, did you proofread your resume? And as Cameron mentioned, it does really help to have someone else review your resume. Even myself, who works in human resources, who works in career development in this space, I always have someone else review my resume before sending it to anyone else. Another one is, is your format correct? Is it simple? Sometimes people think that they have to be really creative to catch the eye of the employer or even a university, and they do that in their format. I see a lot of icons and different things, and while that may be acceptable for perhaps the arts, outside of that, it really is best to keep your resume simple. And, Cameron already alluded to kind of the algorithms that some of these systems have nowadays, and I will share a lot of icons and pictures and images actually can create complications for those algorithms as well. So another reason why it's really important to keep it simple. It helps the employer or whoever's reviewing your resume too. They usually have a certain idea in mind of the way a resume is typically set up. So when you can help them out by setting it up in a more traditional way, that helps the employer get to the information and review it a little bit more easily. And so the place to be creative really is within your bullet points. So that leads me to, are your bullet points robust? Because I do have a lot of people come to me to say, well, how do I make myself stand out? How can I show my creativity if my template or my resume looks the same as someone else? And I share with them that it really falls within your bullet points. You want to make sure that in your bullet points, that's where you show your creative ability and also the connection to the specific position, or even if it's applying to a university, showing that you're going to be a great candidate for that particular university. So that's really, again, what Cameron mentioned is the tailoring. That's really where you want to show your creativity. And then ask yourself, put yourself in their shoes for a minute. Okay, so I'm working in the admissions office. I'm an admissions counselor, and I'm making a decision on this particular individual. Now, of course, we're all going to be a little bit biased, right, about our own selves, or even thinking about it as a recruiter. I'm a recruiter looking for these particular skills. I've got the job description in front of me. Now I'm looking at my resume as best as I can objectively, and I'm asking myself, do I meet these requirements? Did I do a great job selling myself? And, if not, go back and start back over, right? Start the process back over. But really the final question here is, did you earn an interview? Because at the end of it, that's what you're working towards. I know it's really difficult sometimes to demonstrate ourselves on an 8.5 by 11, right? 2-dimensional thing. So it's nice when you can get to the interview and you can really start to sell yourself, and you can show your how you're dynamic and show your personality. But the goal of the resume really is just to get you to that interview. And that goes for an interview with the college admissions team, or even an interview for that particular job. So that's ultimately your goal, is did you actually earn that interview? So I hope that your resume passed the inspection. If not, that's why we're here tonight. So hopefully you've been able to take some of these helpful tips to make those adjustments to your resume. But we're actually going to share a few additional tips. I'm going to kick it over to Cameron.
So you've heard a lot about your resume, but I think it starts a little bit earlier than your resume. So in this case, you want to start planning early in high school. So that may even mean identifying what you want to do. And you may not know specifically what you want to do, but identifying whether you may want to go to college or whether you want to go directly into the workforce after you graduate. And this can help you to tailor ideas such as picking up a trade. If your school or district offers trade classes, maybe you want to pick up, horticulture, or you want to pick up welding or something of that nature. So just identifying what that path might look like. And hey, maybe you want to go to college and you want to have a trade. I kind of did the same. I did cosmetology and then I also went to college. So maybe you want to do them both so that you have options. So just try to identify what that might look like and start to plan a little bit early so that you can start to build your resume out, or even build the concept in your head of what you might want to do. Next, be consistent and show commitment. So if you decide that a trade is what you want to do, and the course is that you have to take 3 years worth of classes, you want to show consistency and commitment in that. So that way, when you do graduate, you have those certifications and you're able to go directly into your field of choice. Or if it's college and you decide that you just want to do a number of community service activities, or you want to do internships while you're still in high school to help you to identify what that looks like. Even that shows commitment and consistency within your resume and what you're able to accomplish in school to help you to get to a point of college, or being able to sell yourself on your college applications or through your resume. The next one's don't go it alone. And then I'll partner this into the final one, which is utilize all resources. So you have a number of resources that are available to you. So whether it be a current part-time job that you have, or whether it be your guidance counselors in school, or if you're working on a community service or an outreach project, those individuals that are your leaders in those efforts are able to share in your efforts as well, in terms of being able to help you to sell yourself in your resume, but also in whatever career path that you choose. So whether it be asking your guidance counselors more about how to build a resume after this presentation, or asking your manager at your part-time job about what career paths may be presented to you in that position, or all of those things definitely help you to identify a career path, and then being able to kind of build out your resume based on some of the things that you've gotten from those resources. So be able to utilize all your resources and don't feel like you have to go at it on your own. You do have, access to these individuals, even if you don't have a job at the moment, or you haven't necessarily gotten outside or to be able to do any community service or outreach. You do have your guidance counselors, you have your teachers who are all willing to help. And then also Holly will share some of our contact details. We're also willing to help if you want to reach out to us as well. So there's ways to get prepared, but you do have to have a plan of action, and then you have to follow through with creating that resume and executing on that plan of action.
Excellent. So here are our contact information. So you're welcome to reach out to us and ask us any questions individually, but also wanted to go ahead and see if there are any questions.
First of all, I want to thank you all for such a great and informative presentation. This has been excellent, and I know that I'm thankful that we've been able to record this, and our students will be able to watch this not only at home with their parents, but even in their classes. So thank you all very much. While you all were talking, I think there were a few questions that popped up in my head that I just wanted to kind of throw out to you all, get your opinion on. First one is something that I've heard a lot from our students, and simply this: how long should my resume be?
Yes, I can take this one to get us started. And then if anybody else wants to chime in. So really and truly, your resume should be one page, and that's not your master resume. It's okay to have a master resume I have a master resume that's 2 or 3 pages that I just keep a running list of all the things that I've done. Because I will tell you, you'll start to forget how many people you served in that community service or what activities you did. That stuff kind of goes away over time. So it's important to have a master resume where you can take note of those things. But in terms of what you actually submit, it really should be one page. And if it's not, then I would really question how much are you really tailoring it to that particular position or to the university?
I would agree. I would say that it lends to being very concise and tailoring the resume as well. And after a certain point of so many bullets, you wouldn't want to lose the recruiter's attention or the employer's attention. So I think keeping it very concise and being very direct in what you are trying to convey will help you to keep it to about a page.
Very good, very good. So here's another one that came up in my mind while we were talking. You mentioned brands in the very beginning of your presentation. And I know it's a little bit of a different thought for our students to think of themselves as a brand, but what are some things in your mind that make a brand stand out? What makes a brand memorable?
Holly, you want to take that one since you mentioned it?
Sure. I'm very passionate about this topic. So absolutely. I feel like we could have a whole session on how to brand yourself. In terms of what we look for, it really goes back to those key competencies that we already alluded to a moment ago. And there's something called NACE, National Association of Colleges and Employers. So if you look up NACE, they actually do these large surveys to gain perspective year to year. What skills are employers looking for, so that universities can really make sure that students are rounding out those particular competencies. So in terms of 2021, I haven't seen, of course, but 2020, the main competencies you'd look at would be, attention to detail, communication, professionalism, critical thinking, leadership. So those are all really those key competencies or professional competencies that we talked about. And in terms of branding, I think the important part is to make sure that you do consider yourself a brand. And a brand is not how you perceive yourself, but your brand is how others perceive you. So it's a really helpful exercise to go to maybe a teacher or a guidance counselor or a coach or whoever the leaders are that you're working with, and really just ask them, say, hey, if you can really name 3 things, how would you describe me? And then ask yourself, is that the brand that I want to demonstrate? And then if so, there's alignment. But if not, then you maybe need to think about, how you represent yourself and your brand.
What I love about what you said is the ability for our students and for ourselves as adults to have some real honest, realistic self-appraisal, but also to have some people that you could ask honestly, what do you think about me? And students, that can be kind of hard sometimes, to be honest with you, because you're not sure what they're going to say. But I encourage you to be brave and to be bold and to accept their honest feedback and criticism, because criticism doesn't have to be bad. It just might mean that's an area where you can grow and become a little bit better. Okay. So the last.
Yeah, I would love to add to that, actually. I think it's important to mention that your brand is always going to change, right? So your brand that you might have now is not going to be the brand that you might perceive yourself as having in 4 years. So when I started college, I was probably a little bit of a bossy person. And now that I have gotten into the workforce and have gone through college, I think I can be perceived as a little bit more collaborative. So it's just important to note that as a high school student, you're really not going to have 100% of a vision of what that looks like, and that's okay.
Very good, very good. And since you mentioned high school, I want you all to think back for just a little bit. What resume advice would you give yourself in high school?
I'll take a stab at it first.
Yeah, you go first. I might need to think about it. It's been a long time.
Well, I would actually tell myself to do more community service or those things that I'm passionate about now. I would say that I share the same ideals, or I'm passionate about some of the same things. I would actually build my resume around those things because I think those things are a part of what defines me now. I think I did a lot of, trying to secure a job instead of identifying those other areas of expertise or even lending to my areas of expertise. And so I think I would build my resume around those things, or those things that I was passionate about, instead of strictly trying to secure the job or secure the right school, Yeah,
I think for me, this may be hard to imagine considering my career choice. I used to be absolutely terrified of the word resume. That the idea of having to look at this blinking cursor, right, on a Word document, and I'm told to create this one page about myself that'll attract an employer, that really intimidated me, which maybe is why I ended up falling in love with this career of helping others with resumes. Maybe there's some consistency there. So as far as advice goes, I would say maybe try to take that intimidation factor out. I know we talked a lot about focusing on what the employer is looking for, making sure you proofread. We're telling you all these do's, and even those do's may be intimidating. So just encourage you to don't feel like that very first version that you create has to be the final version. I think if you do it that way, you're going to trip yourself up a little bit, and it may be difficult to get started. I know that was the case for me. So just start working, just start putting it on paper, right? And then you can have 3, 4, 5 versions. But I guess the greatest advice I would say is just don't be intimidated by the process. We've all been there.
That's right.
Yeah, I would say for me, I would just tell myself not to discount the things that I did that I maybe thought, weren't deserving of being on a resume. There are so many things that you were probably involved in that you think, oh, university doesn't care about this, and our employer doesn't care about this, or just the small things. So, for example, when I was playing sports, I did a lot of fundraising, and I didn't think those things were important, but they actually show a lot of initiative and organization and collaboration skills. So just kind of take a look at the things that you've done over your high school career, and don't discount them. You know, they are important, and you can pull out a lot of really good competencies from the things that you've done that might even just seem super small.
All very good. All very good responses. I have one more question, because I know a lot of our students are kind of in between, you know, as you all mentioned, whether I'm going straight to the job force, whether I'm applying for a college. You know, how is my resume different if I'm applying for a college or applying for a job?
Yes, I can take a stab at this, and if anyone else wants to jump in. So now, having worked both in higher education and in human resources, I think it really depends on the language. So check very carefully if a university says they're looking for a CV, curriculum vitae, that is different than a resume. So and I will say some of the things that we talked about tonight obviously will still apply. But CVs typically are a little bit longer. So in some cases, CVs are 2 pages. So just keep that in mind. So again, just make sure you read what that's asking for. So is it a CV or is it a resume? Now, nowadays, a lot of admissions offices will accept either one. They'll leave it up to you. They'll say a CV or a resume. And in that case, I actually find it a little bit easier to upload a resume because in my mind, at least that's dual purpose. That's something that you can use both for an entry-level position that you're applying for, a part-time job even, and as well as a university. And then another conversation for another day is if you ever decide to apply for graduate school.
Yes. Yes, that is definitely a whole nother subject with a lot of information that goes in there. Cameron, do you have anything else you want to add on this one?
No, I was going to say essentially the same. It's a matter of wording. I think what you're trying to convey is a little bit different. I think that those job skills are directly related to the job, where you may want to sell a lot more of those competencies and other skills whenever you're talking more of your college resume. So I think it's just a matter of wording in your audience. So you'll change that based on who you're trying to appeal to.
Absolutely.
I would say what made my resumes different from college and jobs is when I was applying to colleges, I really highlighted the things that I did academically and my leadership skills. So I know my university, I went to South Carolina, was really looking for those leadership qualities in any kind of positions that I held then. Whereas with jobs that I've applied to, I highlight more of my experiences and my community service. So that's
Awesome.
kind of how it differed for me.
Well, you all, I see Holly had some technical difficulties. Hopefully she'll be able to hop on before we finally go. But I want to thank you each for once again giving up a little bit of your time to be with us tonight. Students and family, I hope that you all had a great time, that you learned a little bit from this. Next week on the 24th, we'll be talking about military options for your future. So if you see yourself serving the country in military service, we'll have a little bit of information for you there. But until next time, once again, this has been No Limit November. I appreciate you. I thank you, and we'll see you next time. Y'all have a great night. Bye-bye.
All right. Thanks for having us.